After the age of 60, many of us suddenly find ourselves with more free time. And in those quiet hours, a sweet pastry, a fizzy soda, or a crunchy bag of chips can feel like a small daily comfort. At first glance, the habit seems harmless, even a little treat to brighten the day. But what most people don't realize is that these very foods are silently becoming the fuel that feeds Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. Recent studies show that refined sugar, unhealthy fats, and preservatives in processed foods don't just harm the heart or add extra pounds. They directly affect the brain. They drive up inflammation, accelerate the breakdown of nerve cells, and speed the buildup of toxic plaques in the brain. Over years, these hidden effects can weaken memory, slow reaction time, and sharply raise the risk of Alzheimer's. In today's video, we'll break this down clearly and simply is why sugar and processed foods are so dangerous for the brain, the mechanisms that make them enemies of memory, and most importantly, what safer, brain-friendly choices we can turn to instead. Before we dive in, if you find health topics like this helpful, don't forget to hit like, share this video with friends your age, and subscribe so you won't miss any of the important insights coming up. And I'd love to ask you something in your daily routine. Do you often reach for candy or soda as a little pick-me-up? Or have you already found healthier swaps that work better for you? When we think of fast food or processed snacks, we often picture younger people. But in reality, plenty of folks over 60 also turn to these foods quite often. It might be a can of soda with lunch, a slice of cake in the afternoon, or a crunchy bag of chips while watching TV. Sometimes, for the sake of convenience, we reach for a frozen pizza or a few pieces of fried chicken instead of cooking a full meal. These foods are tasty, easy to find in any grocery store, and require no effort, so they naturally weave themselves into the daily routines of many older adults. What makes these foods especially tempting is the way they act on the brain. The moment we eat candy, sip soda, or bite into a hot French fry, the brain responds by releasing dopamine, the neurotransmitter often nicknamed the happiness hormone. Dopamine gives us a brief feeling of pleasure, as if we've just been rewarded. For older adults, that moment of joy can feel even more valuable. After retirement, life may bring fewer new experiences, less social interaction, and sometimes a sense of loneliness. In those moments, a sweet pastry or fizzy drink becomes a kind of emotional pick-me-up. The problem is that dopamine works on a reward and craving cycle. The good feeling it produces doesn't last long, and soon the brain wants more to reach the same level of satisfaction. That's why so many of us say things like, "I couldn't stop at just one cookie," or "I had a couple of candies and suddenly I wanted more." It's the same addictive mechanism seen in other behaviors, only here, the trigger is sugar, unhealthy fats, and food additives. Food companies understand this cycle all too well. That's why sweets, chips, pizza, and sodas are carefully designed to maximize palatability. High sugar, high salt, high fat, and flavor enhancers all combine to create a powerful sensory experience. The stronger the brain's response to sweet and fatty flavors, the more dopamine is released, and the easier it is to get hooked. Research published in the Journal of Neuroscience has shown that when people consume sugary or fast foods, the brain's striatum, the reward center, lights up vividly on MRI scans. This is clear evidence that high-sugar, high-fat foods hit the brain's emotional control center like a jolt, making us want to repeat the behavior again and again. It explains why a slice of cake can bring instant joy. But if it becomes a daily habit, the brain grows dependent, and long-term health begins to suffer. A familiar image is an older adult sitting in front of the TV at night with a bag of chips or a soda. The intention might be just to snack a little, but before long, the bag is empty, or the can is gone, and the amount of sugar and fat consumed far exceeds what the body actually needs. At that moment, the brain feels rewarded by the dopamine surge, but the nervous system and blood vessels are left to bear the consequences. In other words, Processed foods play a double role. They're the instant friend bringing pleasure in the moment, but also the silent enemy of brain health. Once these eating patterns take hold, the brain is caught in a dopamine loop while also facing chronic inflammation, the dangerous starting point for long-term neurological damage. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the next section. In the first section, we looked at why sweets and fast food can so easily become a hard-to-break habit. Now it's time to dig deeper into the biological consequences they leave behind. Among those effects, inflammation is the most important mechanism, the bridge that connects today's treats with tomorrow's risk of dementia. When we hear the word inflammation, many of us think of swelling, redness, or aching joints. But inflammation doesn't just happen on the outside. It can quietly take place inside our organs, including the brain. After a meal high in refined sugar cookies, candy, or soda, for example, blood glucose spikes. The body rushes to release insulin to pull sugar into cells. When this cycle repeats day after day, metabolism becomes disrupted, free radicals build up, and the immune system flips into a constant alert mode. The result is the release of inflammatory molecules called cytokines. And here's the troubling part: these cytokines can cross the blood-brain barrier and trigger inflammation in the nervous system itself. Think of brain cells as delicate electrical wires, carrying signals that control memory, thoughts, and emotions. Once inflammation sets in, it acts like rust corroding those wires. At first, the signals just flicker, but over time, damage builds up, and more wires stop working altogether. This is how chronic brain inflammation gradually undermines memory and cognitive function. A study published in the Journal of Neuroinflammation in 2021 found that people who consumed diets high in added sugars had significantly higher levels of brain inflammation compared to those who ate less sugar. MRI scans showed that the hippocampus, the region critical for forming new memories, shrunk more quickly in the high sugar group. That explains why a sweet tooth doesn't just add to weight or diabetes risk. It strikes directly at memory itself. In daily life, this shows up in familiar ways. After a dessert-heavy meal or a sugary drink, many people feel an immediate lift in mood. But just a couple of hours later, the mind turns sluggish, concentration fades, and small lapses in memory appear. That swing sugar high followed by brain fog isn't just coincidence. It's the combined result of blood sugar crashing and inflammation dulling the brain's sharpness. Because it passes quickly, we often shrug it off. But when repeated for years, the cumulative damage is serious. There's another layer to this story. Inflammation doesn't just harm neurons. It also weakens glial cells, the support staff that protect and nourish neurons. Without these guardians, the brain is like a city with no maintenance crew. The signal pathways begin to crumble, leaving memory and reasoning increasingly unstable. In short, sweets and fast food aren't just addictive culprits. As we discussed earlier, they're also powerful triggers of inflammation in the brain. And once chronic inflammation takes hold, memory, alertness, and clear thinking are gradually worn down. Over time, this ongoing damage leads to something even more serious. The brain begins to resist insulin and can no longer use energy efficiently. That's the focus of our next section. If brain inflammation is the slow, steady rain wearing down nerve cells, then insulin resistance is the power switch that plunges the brain into an energy shortage. It's a mechanism we don't often hear about in daily conversation. Yet neuroscientists see it as a key to understanding why diets high in sugar and processed foods can feed Alzheimer's disease. Under normal circumstances, insulin acts like a key. It unlocks the doors of brain cells so glucose, the brain's main fuel, can enter. With glucose flowing in, the brain has the steady energy it needs to power memory, focus, and thought. But when we overload on sugar for years, nerve cells gradually stop responding to insulin's signal. This is called insulin resistance. In other words, the key is still there, but the lock refuses to turn. Glucose floats in the bloodstream without getting into the cells, leaving the brain in an energy famine right in the middle of a sugar surplus. This is why many scientists now refer to Alzheimer's disease as type 3 diabetes. Just like type 2 diabetes in the body, where cells ignore insulin, but this time the resistance happens inside the brain itself. The result is a steep decline in memory, slower reactions, and even changes in mood or personality. A study published in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease in 2024 found that people with high markers of insulin resistance had more than twice the risk of developing Alzheimer's compared to those with good blood sugar control. Brain scans revealed that the hippocampus, the brain's memory center, was much less active in the insulin-resistant group. In practical terms, when the brain can't take in enough glucose, those memory hubs slip into sleep mode and slowly shrink over time. In everyday life, this shows up in ways many older adults recognize. After a meal heavy in sweets, some people complain that their mind feels blank. Thinking becomes harder, or they forget what was just said. Others describe it as the brain feels tired, even if the body doesn't. What they're really experiencing is an energy-starved brain surrounded by sugar, but unable to use it. The troubling part is that insulin resistance doesn't appear suddenly. It builds silently over years. By the time memory lapses are noticeable, the underlying resistance may already be well established. That's why identifying harmful eating habits early is so important to stop this spiral before it deepens. In short, insulin resistance leaves the brain hungry at the feast, cut off from the fuel it needs to stay sharp. And once the brain runs on empty, the next step is almost inevitable: the buildup of amyloid, the toxic debris that clogs brain tissue and drives neurodegeneration. That's the focus of our next section. If inflammation and insulin resistance are the door openers, then amyloid is the saboteur working inside the brain. Amyloid is a type of protein that naturally forms in the body, but when it is overproduced and not cleared away, it clumps together into plaques. These amyloid plaques are one of the most well-known hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. So why are diets high in sugar and processed foods linked to amyloid buildup? The answer lies in how the brain handles waste. Normally, when nerve cells do their job, a small amount of amyloid is created. In a healthy system, the brain's cleanup crew quickly breaks it down and removes it. But when we overload on sugar, snacks, and fast food, the inflammation and insulin resistance we've just discussed weaken that cleanup system. As a result, amyloid begins to pile up. Think of the brain as a city. The neurons are the roads, and amyloid is the trash. If the sanitation workers keep doing their rounds, the streets stay clean and traffic flows smoothly. But if the workers go on strike, garbage piles up, roads get blocked, and traffic snarls. In the brain, when amyloid forms plaques, nerve fibers are blocked and electrical signals are interrupted. Memory fades, thinking slows, and over time, neurodegeneration takes hold. A 2022 study published in Nature Neuroscience showed that high-sugar diets accelerated amyloid buildup in the brains of middle-aged and older adults. PET scans revealed that people who consumed large amounts of processed foods had much higher levels of amyloid compared to those who ate a healthier diet. This clearly confirmed the connection between sugar, inflammation, insulin resistance, and plaque formation. Even more concerning, once amyloid builds up, it sets the stage for another damaging protein called tau. Inside neurons, tau proteins can twist into tangles, like electrical wires all knotted up, blocking signals from passing through. The deadly combination of amyloid outside the cells and tau tangles inside has been proven to trigger massive nerve cell death in Alzheimer's disease. And it can all start with what seems like an innocent eating habit. This is why many neurologists stress diet control as one of the most effective strategies for preventing dementia. Because once amyloid deposits are firmly in place, medicine today cannot fully clear them out. At best, treatments may slow the process, but they cannot completely reverse it. Put simply, Amyloid is neural trash that gets fed daily by sodas, candies, chips, and fried foods. The more of these foods we eat, the more fuel we hand over to the plaques. And when the brain is buried in waste, clarity and sharpness are the first to vanish. In short, amyloid is the end result of the destructive chain started by sugar and processed foods. They spark inflammation, drive insulin resistance, and ultimately open the door for amyloid buildup. Once amyloid takes hold, neurodegeneration accelerates and the risk of Alzheimer's rises sharply. The encouraging part is this spiral can be slowed down and even partly reversed if we replace those harmful eating habits. The next step is to look at which healthy, brain-friendly choices can not only satisfy us, but also defend our memory and mental clarity. That's exactly what we'll explore in the next section. After breaking down all the ways sugar and processed foods act as fuel for Alzheimer's, the most important question is, what can we do differently? The good news is that the solution is not complicated at all. Instead of trying to cut out favorite habits overnight, which often feels like deprivation and rarely lasts, we can gradually replace them with natural choices that are just as satisfying and far kinder to the brain. The first swap is fresh fruit. Unlike candy loaded with refined sugar, fruit provides sweetness through natural fructose, balanced with fiber and a host of vitamins. Fiber slows the absorption of sugar, preventing those sharp blood sugar spikes and crashes. Vitamins C and E, along with antioxidants in fruit, help reduce inflammation and shield nerve cells from free radical damage. A crisp apple, a slice of juicy watermelon, or a few pieces of orange in the afternoon not only satisfy a sweet craving, but also nourish the brain in a gentle, sustainable way. Nuts are another excellent substitute for packaged snacks. Walnuts, almonds, cashews, and pumpkin seeds all have that crunch we love. But they bring healthy omega-3 fats that fight inflammation and strengthen the structure of nerve cell membranes. Research has shown that people who eat nuts regularly enjoy better memory and a lower risk of cognitive decline. So 1. A small handful of walnuts with a cup of green tea can easily take the place of a sugary afternoon pastry, keeping you full longer without flooding the brain with sugar and unhealthy fats. Leafy greens also deserve the spotlight. Spinach, kale, and broccoli are rich in folate, vitamin K, and lutein nutrients directly linked to sharper cognition. Added daily, they help preserve mental agility and slow the pace of brain aging. Instead of a frozen pizza, a fresh salad with leafy greens, tomatoes, and a drizzle of olive oil is not only colorful and tasty, but also a true feast for your neurons. Drinks matter too. Instead of a can of soda, you can choose herbal teas such as chamomile or green tea, or the simplest choice of all, plain water. Green tea contains catechins, powerful antioxidants that improve circulation and guard the brain against inflammation. And while water may seem basic, it's the foundation for every metabolic process in the body. Staying hydrated each day is one of the easiest ways to keep the brain cool and running smoothly. The key is to make these changes gradually. If you're used to drinking 2 sodas a day, quitting cold turkey might feel miserable and even increase cravings. But if you replace just 1 soda with a cup of herbal tea and keep at it, your body will adapt. Within weeks, many people notice they no longer crave artificial sweetness as much as before. And remember, replacing doesn't mean total denial. If you enjoy a slice of cake at a family gathering once in a while, that's perfectly fine. What matters is that your daily habits revolve around fruit, nuts, vegetables, and healthy drinks. That's what builds lasting brain protection. Throughout this video, we've uncovered an uncomfortable truth. Foods that seem harmless cakes, sodas, fried chicken, pizza, and crunchy snacks are quietly feeding Alzheimer's after age 60. From the dopamine reward trap, to brain inflammation, to insulin resistance starving nerve cells, and finally to amyloid buildup. The entire chain of damage ties back to diet. The takeaway is simple sugar, and processed foods don't just affect your waistline or heart. They directly threaten the brain, the very organ that preserves memory, independence, and joy. The hopeful part is that we can slow and even prevent this downward spiral with simple everyday swaps. Instead of that afternoon pastry, try a handful of walnuts and a cup of green tea. Instead of soda, go for a refreshing glass of water or herbal tea. Instead of a frozen pizza, choose a fresh salad with leafy greens and olive oil. These small shifts, repeated day after day, add up to powerful protection for the mind. Before we wrap up, if you found today's video helpful, please hit like, share it with friends your age, and subscribe so we can continue exploring practical, natural health strategies together. And here's a question for you when a sweet craving hits. What do you usually reach for, a candy bar, a soda, or have you already found a healthier choice that works for you? Share in the comments, because your experience might inspire others to make better choices for their brain.